Hi everybody, welcome back
Hi.
to our next segment, and today we're going to talk about corporations. My name is Michael. I'm here with my buddy Michael.
Hi there. Hi, Mike.
We can call us Team M&M, who knows? But anyway, we're going to talk a little bit about the history of corporations and what they do, how they operate, and yeah, we'll just take it from there. Hope you get something out of it. We'll go ahead and start with the history a little bit. Corporations, based on our research, began somewhere around the 1700s in England, and it was actually through a charter, which is a law which provides special rights to someone. And in the 1700s, the first business charters or corporate charters were given by kings as a way to help rich business people kind of move ahead with risky ideas. And some of these risky ideas needed a large investment. And so they had to be protected a little bit, because sometimes when you invest, you couldn't be successful. Other times you can fail. So there had to be some type of instrument that would help protect these people who were willing to develop their ideas, but with some risk involved. And of course, right away, some problems arose, and the American government also started to look at these very carefully, and especially about corporate chartered businesses. They also made sure that corporations understood that they were the second fiddle. They played second fiddle. The government was the boss. This final bit could be a loss of a corporation became a powerful multinational. Like nowadays we have Google and Microsoft and a lot of those global companies that some people think actually rule the world. So, and if you're going after a corporation and you felt that they've done something wrong to you, you have layer after layer after layer, and they will probably break you financially before you ever have a chance to get your foot through the door. But let's go back a little bit to the late 1800s. Some problems began to arise, and most notably was the idea of something known as a moral hazard. A moral hazard is where an investment is insured. Businesses make foolish or risky business commitments, or even commit fraud. And at the time of the election of Rutherford B. Hayes in America, and as early as 1887, he had said, "This is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people, but no longer." Okay? It's a government of corporations, by corporations, and for corporations. So already, from the time that corporations were developed, or they saw their genesis in the 1700s, already in the 1800s, there are some problems with it already.
Absolutely right. And speaking of Rutherford B. Hayes in 1887, it was the year before that that the Supreme Court granted basically like personhood to corporations, sort of in furtherance of the corporate charter, which, as you said, created this moral hazard where people they would do, like you said, maybe invest in something fraudulent or do a very foolish business venture, creating short-term gain, but which was obviously not going to work in the more longer term, but they didn't care because they had already made a bunch of money, and then they'd be bailed out by the government, or whatever insurance agency had been granted in the charter. Beyond that, corporations, one of the rights that they were granted was, of course, the right to free speech, enshrined in the glorious United States Constitution. What does that mean, free speech in a political sense? That means contributing to politicians, contributing to political parties, thereby creating a kind of a control which was not initially envisioned when it was understood that the government or the king, etc., was the boss, and the business charter was second to that. That began to change when the Supreme Court in America granted this personhood status to corporations.
And I can take that a step further. When corporate bylaws were enacted, the people who were running the company, I'm not talking about shareholders, I'm talking about CEO, Chief Operating Officer, Chief Financial Officer. When these folks began to run the company, in the corporate bylaws, they were insulated from any kind of legal pursuit if, in fact, they had taken the investment from what would later become the shareholders, and they used it in such a way that maybe it was negligent, maybe they used it in a fraudulent way, and so the shareholders want to take some type of legal action against them. These folks were insulated through the corporate bylaws. In other words, the people who had been wronged or harmed and lost their investment could only pursue some sort of legal remedy against the corporation, not the actual persons involved.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that goes right on with what you were saying about Hayes's comment that America, in 87, he said, 1887 that is, that America is no longer a nation of people, by the people, for the people, but rather a nation of corporations, for corporations. And you see now that it's a hugely concerning affair, especially in America, where this free speech thing has allowed corporations to basically control the government in every way, shape, and form. If you look at the current administration, it's completely peopled by senior corporate individuals.
Right. And in that revolving door policy
Yes.
of our present administration, a lot of those people came from the private sector where maybe they had done well, but they got into the political aspect of it and they didn't do well, or they didn't do what their boss envisioned, our president, and so they were shown the door. And the interesting thing is that we've talked before about corporate social responsibility as being something positive, but when we look at these corporate individuals now involved in our government, I, for one, and this is only my opinion, I can't see that there's anything positive coming out of that now.
Well, certainly you're absolutely right. There is nothing positive coming out of it. And just to take what you said just a step further, people who are previously senior, corporate, CEOs and whatnot, bosses, who go to work for the government now, their only mission is to make it better for other corporations like the ones from where they came. Example, you have somebody who is maybe the Secretary of State, who is the previous CEO of ExxonMobil, oil company. Well, all he does is go in there and make it better, a better business climate, better rules and regulations for oil companies. And so whether he was successful or not as a government employee, this person doesn't care at all, even if his boss, our president, lets him go. He's already achieved his aims that he had when he went into office, which was not to make the regulatory climate and the laws and regulations governing corporations more beneficial to people, but quite the opposite, to make it more beneficial for the corporations.
And actually, you can say that Rutherford B. Hayes in 1887 might have been somewhat of a fortune teller, because when we look at this now, just as you said, this is a government of corporations. It's not a government of people, by the people, for the people. I think the people are sort of pushed by the wayside, and the corporations have taken over.
Absolutely so. And now we see that not only have corporations taken over the American government, this is, I wouldn't call it small potatoes, but it's certainly not the whole pie. These corporations are international, multinational corporations And don't forget, the economy of these corporations are bigger than the economies of most nations. So the power involved with this multinational corporate overstructure with no morals whatsoever, the only thing they care about is making money, and that's enshrined in law, certainly are not concerning themselves with what's right morally, environmentally, and with people, etc.
And I think we'll leave it right there, because this is a type of conversation that we could have for a long, long time, talking about the pros and cons, the advantages and disadvantages of corporations. And as you can see from our conversation, it's a bit one-sided. We're not really too